All right, so welcome to the AWS San Francisco Summit. Like, how awesome is it to be here in person? First time I've been back in San Francisco, or even the Bay Area, and I can't even remember how long. So I'm just super grateful to be here, and grateful to be here in person and meeting with you all today. This is session ENT101. We are going to discuss transformational capabilities to drive your modern digital enterprise. So for anybody that is actively playing buzzword bingo, you can head to the door and collect your prize, because I think we hit most of them in the opening sentence. No, but seriously, this will get far more practical and far more interesting as we get into it. I've been with AWS for just over 7.5 years. I've spent most of my time working with large enterprise customers across the globe. And all of that time helping them not just adopt cloud technology, but transform the way they work, transform the way they provide solutions to customers. And I've been super fortunate to work with some of the world's smartest people, incredibly intelligent people from our customers that are the size and shape and making changes to the way they deliver products that literally change the way that we live, change our day-to-day interactions, change the way that we work, change the way we consume, and change how we do things across the globe. Also intelligent people from AWS, intelligent people from our solution architecture team, our enterprise support team, our TAMs, our professional services team, our AWS services teams, as well as our AWS partner network. And I've just had so much experience over the last 7.5 years. And so what we're presenting today is the learnings my team has from all of these experiences over 7.5 years. This isn't smart stuff we came up with. This is smart stuff that we've actually started to decipher and understand, and looking for patterns inside of our large enterprise customers. So my name is Ryan Seaman. I'm the global head of AWS's strategy for transformation and the global head of our programs for transformation for customers. What we're going to talk about today is my team's view on transformation that hopefully is a bit different than everything you've heard for the past 10 years as we've talked about transformation, enterprise transformation, digital transformation, and every other transformation buzzword you can think of. So we got a simple agenda. We're going to start with the challenge of keeping up. So we're all talking about transformation. Everybody feels like they're behind. Everybody's paranoid about whether or not they're doing the right things. For most of us, transformation is somewhere between a 4-letter word and a mythical creature. And yet here we are still talking about transformation. So we'll talk about why that's happening and what's causing those challenges of everybody trying to keep up with each other. Next, we'll talk about some enterprises that are figuring it out. So enterprises that are making significant progress. I give a few customer examples. We'll dive into those just a little bit, but that part of the session is really about giving you the confidence that you can transform and produce business results that you're hoping for. And in the next section, we'll talk about, is transformation the answer? We'll talk about why is transformation so hard for the enterprises? Why is it so difficult to get ourselves organized and be effective in building solutions? So the second part is enterprises that are figuring out, we get confidence. And the third part, I throw you back to the floor and make you think it's impossible. And in the last part of this, where we'll spend the bulk of our time, it's talking about digital business capabilities. It's about business capabilities that we think we can start to build through transformation. So it's about how do we think about not transformation for the sake of transformation, but using transformation as a way to build new capabilities so we can deliver business outcomes to customers faster. We can deliver business outcomes for our business faster. And we can repeat that much faster across our business so that every time we do the process, we get better, more efficient, and more targeted with our outcomes. And then lastly, the last piece that we'll hit is my shameless plug about how AWS can help. So I'll talk about a few different programs and offerings we have that actually help us build those capabilities within our enterprise customer organizations. So let's talk about the era of change and how everything is moving incredibly fast. I don't know if everybody feels it as much as I do, but it just feels like the world is moving at light speed all of the time. And every time I turn around, there's a new thing for me to pay attention to. And really, that's at the heart of what's driving the transformation conversations and digital transformation conversations and the drive for enterprises to try and keep up. So here I call out 4 different key topics that we think does generate a lot of this need for change and a lot of this need for improvement within the legacy traditional enterprise space. And we start with consumer expectations. Consumer expectations have just changed. I use the most obvious and simplest example, which is like the Kindle or the e-reader book scenario, right? We used to go to libraries, we used to go buy books at bookstores, and we used to get books through different means. And today, for the majority of us, we have some kind of technology, digital device, whether it's a tablet or a phone, et cetera, et cetera. And when we want a new book or a magazine or anything editorial to read, we simply download it and we get it faster to our hands than we would have even gotten in the car to go get it in the past. And so the reality is consumers are expecting more from us, and a competition around us is driving their expectation of more. And so we move from that consumer need for changes and changes at a faster pace, and they always want something more, into disruptive competition. The reality is technology has moved so fast that it has reduced the barrier to entry for the majority of our customer industries and the majority of our segments. Even industries like financial services, healthcare, heavily regulated government industries, they're able to start startup businesses in these space and actually have an impact on the market relatively quickly. No need to buy a data center, no need to buy an office. People working remotely can grow a significant multi-million, multi-hundred million dollar business without ever establishing a bunch of capital to actually grow that business. And so disruptive competition and how fast startups are starting to introduce products into the market that displace incumbents is getting more and more scary as the world moves on. The next one is my favorite. It's environmental, social, and governmental policy. So I think this is the most interesting because I really feel like the environmental and social and governmental aspects is where we are all just trying to do better. I think the majority of my customers genuinely have really strong intent when it comes to this space. If you're talking about going green, if you're talking about becoming a low carbon footprint business, if you're talking about generating clean water, all of those things businesses are really caring about today. They're thinking about what it is to be in their communities, how to protect themselves, protect their communities, protect the planet. When you move to social, right? Environments that are more inclusive, that are more diverse, that are more reflective of the communities that we live in and the customer bases that we serve. I think that's another space where the social need inside of businesses is actually driving a significant change in the way we work, transforming how we think and operate and interact with each other, as well as needing digital solutions to support those ways of interactions. And the last one is unplanned events. I'm not gonna go into the event that was COVID, but I think when that hit us, we all realized we've gotta be ready for whatever comes next. Hopefully it's not a pandemic, hopefully it's not a natural disaster, but we need to expect the unexpected. And we need to build a business that is capable of responding to unplanned events much faster than we have in the past. I think, honestly, across the globe, we did a tremendous job of responding to COVID. How fast people went to work from home, network bandwidth, interactive, right? Being able to work with Zoom and Chime and other technologies that allow you to video conference. I thought globally we responded well, but we got to be ready for those things coming forward. So next up, let's talk about some companies that are doing a great job inside of their transformation strategies. We start with Nationwide Insurance. Nationwide Insurance was established in 1925, right? Almost a 100-year-old company at this point. It provides services for auto, home, farm insurance, pet insurance, and is actually the largest supplier of retirement plans for the government. So they have a very diverse and broad and big business. It's been around for a long time and operates across the entire United States. They have a vision to protect people, to protect businesses, and to protect futures with extraordinary care, which I think is really noble, and it talks a lot about why they talk to their customers not as customers, but as members. They think of their customers as members of the Nationwide family. And so if you look at Nationwide, we have some stats on the slides that you can see around the progress that they've made, but I think the most interesting bits are that they're doing it for business outcomes. They're identifying that their future customers want to consume their products differently. They don't want to sign up for a policy. They want usage-based insurance. And to build usage-based insurance, they have to have a different approach to thinking about the way they actually provide that. They've actually started to build a tool they call the Coverage Assistant. Coverage Assistant is a great way to look at insurance for a small, medium business in the United States. Coverage Assistant actually looks at Nationwide's historical data across close to 100 years. Looks at the type of business that it is, looks at the type of market and customers that it serves, looks across similar businesses, looks at the claims from those businesses, and then proactively goes to businesses and says, listen, your coverage for your type of business needs to look like this, based on 100 years worth of history of data. Helps customers understand where they're overinsured, where they're underinsured. The next big one is Enel. Enel has 61 million customers. As of 2020, 40% of their energy actually was coming from renewable energy, which is fantastic. I'm sure it's higher than that today. But if you look at Enel and why Enel started their transformation and their business and digital transformation, it's because they recognize the need for power is changing so fast, and the problems for producing power was changing so fast, they couldn't sustain without creating a better digital capability. So their transformation wasn't started by their IT division, it was started by their CEO. Their CEO said, we have got to do better. We've got to figure out how to produce energy better. We've got to figure out how to partner with other energy providers as well as energy consumers better. And they wanted to build an open platform that allows the energy world to come together to understand how to act better together to get energy where it needs to be faster. And so looking at that and the fact that it was powered, their strategy of transformation was powered by their CEO and broadly pushed across their entire business, tells you about how companies are thinking about transformation. And then lastly, we talk about BP. BP can analyze 1 billion data points globally. It's a tremendous number. They actually started their adoption of cloud technology and the transformation journey back in 2013. To date, they've moved some of their largest SAP footprints to the cloud. They've also moved their oil refinery platform to the cloud. So how they actually optimize their refinery processes runs inside of the cloud. You can imagine how important that is to BP. So their need was the fact that they believe the world will need 30% more energy by 2040 than we have today. I think that's an interesting challenge to solve for, but I think if you take that challenge and you recognize that where we produce power from today likely needs to change to move to renewable energies and clean energies, the problem's even more dramatic. So again, their strategy and their transformation wasn't driven by technology for technology's sake. It was driven by executives that are thinking about the future of the planet and thinking about the future of the world and how to produce energy for the world and do that in the best way possible. And so it's a business outcome that all three of these companies are truly targeting. It's not technology outcomes. And I think that makes it the most interesting piece. So the next thing we want to talk about is why is transformation so hard? The study's a little bit dated. I'll acknowledge that. So this is a 2017 study done by McKinsey where they surveyed thousands of enterprise customers. But I've been in this since before 2017. I can tell you things haven't changed that dramatically since 2017. So I think the premise of the numbers still holds some credence. So interesting stats. 9 out of every 10 companies' executive leadership team believes their industry and their company will be disrupted by digital technologies. 9 out of 10, 90%, and I bet if you went back into the survey again, it's close to 100. 2, 1 out of 6 companies actually believe they have a bold strategy for addressing those challenges. A strategy that will keep them in the game and keep them ahead of competition. Only 1 out of 6. Astronomically low compared to 9 out of 10 that actually acknowledge the need for change in digital technology. And then lastly, 70% of transformation programs fail. So I think if you take the 70% that are failing, and then you go backwards and you say, why are only 1 out of 6 being bold? It's because the failure rate is high. The failure rate is high, reduces confidence, and it reduces that motive and driver to actually go transformation. So why is 70% the number? The reality is enterprise transformation is super hard for a lot of reasons, but I'll talk about 4 of the main reasons. 1, customer install base risk. Enterprise customers have customers that have been around forever. They have customers that are 100 years old. And those customers use their products, they're used to what they deliver, and they understand the business model and work together. They have a high sense of trust, and they expect a high level of operation. And so change is super scary in the enterprise space. 2, the employee base and the capabilities within these large enterprises is amazingly large. When you have to change the way that many people are working at one time, can get really scary really quickly, and how do you identify which skills and capabilities companies need is really difficult to solve for. 3, legacy debt. So much inside of these large enterprise companies. Number of applications acquired via acquisitions, legacy licensing challenges, legacy contracting challenges with MSP providers. The list goes on for legacy debt that every time you feel like you want to go make progress, there's something new that can be thrown in the road to actually slow you down. And then the last piece is lack of conviction. The lack of conviction that says, listen, if we don't start to change now, we will be in trouble in a few years. That is one of the largest challenges we face with most customers. So if you look across those customers, less than 25% of enterprises have actually connected their corporate strategy with their digital strategy. Less than 25%, 1 out of 4, has actually taken their digital strategy and connected it to their corporate business strategy to make it one strategy together. Meaning most organizations still have an IT strategy and they still have a corporate business strategy, and never the two shall meet, but always the two shall yell at each other. And so if we think about that structure and where our companies are today, we have to think about the conundrum that we have to solve for. This is where my team has been working for a long time, understanding the different challenges with different customers, and how we think about transformation is starting to change its shape. And so we ask, are we asking the right questions? Are we thinking about the problems deeply? Do we really understand the challenges of our customers? Is transformation the right target? In most conversations, in most articles that you read, you actually read where transformation is described as it is the outcome we are trying to achieve inside of the efforts that we are doing. And so I ask, is transformation really the right target? Don't get me wrong, I think transformation is needed. But I think when transformation becomes the target, that's when things get dicey. And so if we think about that structure and we think about why transformation may not work, maybe it's not the right target. I can tell you from experience with lots of customers, transformation for transformation's sake typically doesn't work. Transformation that's designed on the front end for a long tail transformation with little experience and actually doing transformation is typically designed pretty poorly. And it takes a little while to learn that the design is flawed before you start to change your design and your transformation strategy. And the last piece I will say is that transformation that is not connected to the corporate strategy is almost always doomed. Transformation where it's not connected to the corporate strategy becomes an IT for IT strategy. And an IT for IT strategy doesn't have the response and the support from line of businesses and the P&L owners in these enterprises to actually support the resource allocation and the level of effort and the work that's required to drive change. So if transformation is not the target, then what is the target? It means to get, what we're thinking of today is that we need to get to the goal of business outcomes and customer outcomes faster and more accurately. And then we need to continue to spin that flywheel so that we're always getting faster and we're always getting more accurate. And so what if we don't think about transformation as the outcome? What if we think about transformation as a means to get to the end? Think about transformation instead of as the outcome. Think about transformation as the training part of your marathon, right? Everybody wants to run a marathon. Running a marathon would be great. The hard part about running a marathon is the weeks and weeks and months of training that you have to do before the marathon. It's building muscle memory to actually run a marathon. And so if we focus on, instead of transforming for transformation's sake, we focus on building capabilities that we believe are going to be reusable across your business, then we're starting to progress and building what an enterprise needs to actually sustain this constant state of change and improvement to actually deliver right outcomes faster, better to customers and to the business itself. And so here we've listed the 8 targets that we think are most important. Again, I'm not going to read them to you because in a little bit I'm actually going to walk through them one at a time and describe them in more detail. This is what the majority of our conversation will be focused on for the rest of the presentation. And our goal here is to really give a deep understanding of what we think the target is. We have programs that can support how to get there. But if we understand why and what we're trying to produce, we can build a better strategy to get to the end game. And so we're not naive. We know that there's far more than 8 capabilities that enterprises need. We know that there are capabilities in every enterprise that need to be more industry specific. They need to be more customer specific. They need to be more specific to that customer. But our belief is that focusing on these specific capabilities, that these capabilities can be tuned and adjusted for every customer to fit the right niches. And if we can get these capabilities in place, then we can expand and express and get beyond these capabilities to additional nuances that are required for your individual businesses. So with that, how about we dive in and I will start to describe our first capability target. Our first capability target is customer insights. Seems a little bit obvious, also a little bit mysterious, but we take this one straight out of the pages from Amazon's books. So Amazon's tagline and our goal is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. I'll use a quote from Jeff Bezos from his 2017 shareholder letter. One thing he loves about customers is that they are divinely discontent and that people have a ferocious appetite for better. And yesterday's wow quickly becomes today's ordinary. This is that whole idea about our consumers want better, faster, newer every day. And the things we get today, we expect more from tomorrow. And so with that in mind, we look at how Amazon thinks about its customer. We think about it very deeply. With us, we put the customer at the center of everything that we do. Everything we do puts the customer at the center. And it's not just about thinking about the customer and knowing the customer. It's about deeply understanding what they need, and not just what they need, but the context that they need it in. What's going on around them? What's going on around you when you're shopping for insurance? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about your family? What's going on when you're procuring things from Amazon? What's going on when you're buying things at the store? What's going on when you have kids and a family? What's going on when you're a single adult living in a new city and you're far away from home? Right? If you think about your consumers' needs and the context that they actually live in when they have those needs, we can actually build solutions for the customer that the customer loves even more. The second thing that we do is we think about those needs so deeply, we identify the durable needs of customers. By durable needs, what we're thinking of here is things your customer is going to need for a very, very, very long time. No matter what you build, they're still going to have that need that's rooted for something more there. So if you look at Amazon's business itself, for us, it was price, selection, and convenience. Those are the durable needs that we think customers will have forever. They will always have a need for a better price. They always have a need for a better selection, and they will always have a need for things to be more convenient. Even though when I order stuff on Amazon now, it shows up in 2 hours at my house. I don't know how you're gonna get much more convenient than that, but I appreciate their dedication to making it better. And so if you think about identifying durable needs inside of your customer base, what it allows you to do is build innovation capacity and build muscle capacity for providing products and solutions you can continuously improve. As you continuously improve those, it builds a better and better, stronger relationship with your customers. As you build that stronger relationship with your customers, you understand them more deeply. As you understand them more deeply, you end up with customers for life that you can always continue to wow by giving them the next thing they need that you deeply understand. And so for us, the big thing about how do you do that is about mechanisms. For Amazon, we use working backwards. Many of you have probably heard of working backwards, right? It's our way of looking at the customer, starting with the customer, and then coming up with ideas on the solutions. And so we use a specific process for it, right? We ask a specific set of questions. We take it through a specific process. We write documents written in a specific format, and we test those documents in specific review processes. And so we use this working backwards structure to really hone and improve our ability to understand our customer so that we can continue to improve customer insights over time. Those processes require us to go look at data from customers, our interactions with customers. How long do we talk to them? When do we talk to them? How do they get to us? When do they stop talking to us? Getting data from core systems inside of our businesses that allow us to understand from our ERP platforms, et cetera, how our customer interactions are occurring. The next one we look at is operational insights. This is not IT technology operations. This is business operations. Operational insights can give you a lot of purview into where your business can be better, and where your business can be better, it usually can lead to better results for customers as well. And so if we think about operational insights, we think about the mass loads of data that we have. Contact centers, mobile platforms where we talk to customers, shipping to customers, receiving things back from customers. All of those interactions with customers on a regular basis creates those interactions that create operational insights. And then we can look at our ERP platforms and our systems of record and understand how much do customer interactions actually cost us? How much does it cost us to get things to customers? How does it cost to get things back from customers, et cetera? So a good example here is, and it's kind of a stretch one, but it helps paint the picture, I think, is wind farms. Wind farm maintenance is something that AWS has been helping large enterprise customers with recently. If you think about a wind farms are typically out in the middle of nowhere. They're in the middle of the ocean, or they're out in the middle of the desert, and they're very inaccessible. And so from a maintenance perspective, getting to a wind farm is expensive. And then once you get there, you have to climb up a wind turbine, which is dangerous, leads to lots of injuries and occasionally fatalities. And so the actual maintenance process of climbing a wind turbine, doing a manual visual inspection, understanding that there is something that needs to be addressed, you likely don't have the stuff with you to fix it, come back down the pool, return to the mothership, get whatever you need. Again, the expensive trip back, again, the dangerous climb, and again, the repairs. And so what happens is that actually drives the cost of maintenance inside of wind farms through the roof, because it's hard to inspect. It's hard to know when you're gonna have problems. When you start to have a problem, if you fix it early, it's cheap. If you fix it late, it's expensive. And so we actually started to use drone technology, right? Drone technology, IoT technology, visualization technology, and edge technologies to look at wind turbines, solving the operational expenses associated to wind turbines by taking a different approach and a different view using digital technologies. A good example here is they predicted that wind farm maintenance over the next 10 years would be $40 billion with a B. And so by using drone technologies and using these approaches to understand where maintenance is needed sooner, faster, and can be done more cheaply, we actually use the drones. They believe this is going to drive down the downtime required from wind turbines by 90%, and it's actually going to drive down the cost of maintenance by 70%. This is what we're thinking of when we think of operational insights. Another example is GE Power nuclear turbines. GE uses IoT sensors inside of their nuclear turbines to monitor their performance. Over time, GE recognized that by monitoring the IoT data, they can improve the maintenance, reduce the downtime, reduce millions of dollars of cost for their customers, which was fantastic and wonderful. But they recognized they could do a much better job with more IoT sensors that were collecting more data, giving them more alerts, giving them more triggers so they could fix things faster. Unfortunately, to do that, they were actually going to move from collecting about 8 gigabytes of data to 200 terabytes of data. And that created a capacity constraint for them they couldn't solve for. And so what they actually did is they moved their operations platform for monitoring nuclear turbines to AWS. They increased the IoT sensors. They looked at their historical data to fund and build the business value case that actually says this is going to be worth the investments. And as they actually did that process, they increased the rate at which they were collecting IoT data. Now they collect 500,000 records a second. 500,000 records a second about the performance of nuclear turbines. 20 billion records a day. They do 1 million data computations a day, understanding how these are performing, and they've reduced their maintenance and their downtimes for nuclear turbines tremendously, improving the customer experience, improving the world's experience, and then saving millions and millions and millions of dollars around this. And so when we think about operations, that's what we're thinking about. The next one is portfolio and culture change. So if you think about the top two, those are your demand. Those are creating the demand where your customer and your business has an opportunity to improve. The next one is probably the most difficult to describe. It's a portfolio and culture change. Think of the portfolio feed as the demand is coming in, telling you have somewhere you need to think about working differently and doing better. The culture change piece is how do you create a process that you can actually go to parts of your business that the portfolio is saying be better and be different, and actually build that change capability into that part of your business. This is about creating a culture of change, sustainable, repeatable change, the idea of continuously changing as a culture, right? A culture where it's no longer the expectations that things will launch and stay stable for long periods of time. But anything that is stagnant and not changing is the exception instead of the rule. And so we think about that, and we think about the culture change that's required in these organizations to drive efficiency into how you solve customer problems and business challenges. One of our best examples actually came from the World Fuel Services Company. It's an energy provider based out of Miami, Florida. It's a $40 billion business. 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago, 2020, Jeff Smith, who's the COO for World Fuel Services, actually presented at reinvent about the culture change approach that he used for their business. And I loved it because the thing he described was that he wants culture change to be operationalized. Operationalizing culture change so that you can actually look at it, you can learn about it, you can practice it, you can measure it, and you can get better at it. But his idea is about changing the way that they work. He said to do that, he had to get his leaders together and actually focus on creating clarity and purpose for their teams, for the work environment, and then motivating them to do better things. And so he got his leadership team together. They identified what are the big challenges they needed to solve. They built goals associated to those challenges, And then they got together to discuss how they actually make that happen. They recognized they had two key problems to solve. One is set up the organization so they could be more efficient in the way they distribute work to teams that are capable of getting things done, maximizing the throughput of the team as opposed to the throughput of the prioritization process ahead of the teams. The second thing he looked at was building talent density at the right place. In most enterprises, we build talent density inside of the leadership level. As a matter of fact, we take really good people that are really good at getting things done, and because they're good at getting things done, we turn them into leaders, which sometimes they're not the best at. So his focus was actually building talent density in the working level to actually get to producing the business outcomes that they needed. As they talked about that, what they actually understood is that if they build that talent density inside of that bottom working layer, it actually reduces your need for a lot of overhead up the stack. So if you can build a culture and a set of teams that have the right skill sets to actually do the work they have to do, you don't need as many leaders because the teams lead themselves. And so the last thing that he really understood was that you have to measure these things. It's not about having a goal of just creating the right density of work. It's not about just the organizational structure of distributing work. It's actually measuring and improving over time that actually drives the change flywheel. And so they actually created a mechanism and an approach for measuring both the leaders as well as the teams themselves. And by measuring the leaders and the teams, what they're able to do is allow those teams to take feedback from those around them. Look at which indicators they measure that are green and look at which indicators they measure that are red. Inherently, people want to do better. And so if you give them feedback that shows where they are red, they will go find teams and they will go find leaders around them that actually help them get better. They can look at what they're doing, emulate their processes, emulating their approaches, and actually get better, which creates that flywheel of change. And then on a monthly basis, they can continue to measure and adjust the measurements so that what they were measuring 6 months ago as green and acceptable, maybe that's yellow today because now we expect more because we've gotten more efficient and better at what we're doing. And so if you will go across that, really that's what we're thinking about when we think about the culture and change aspects of this. The story here is really to drive into an approach and a mechanism so that you can measure change and you can measure the improvement of your culture over time and ensure that your culture is heading in the direction that you want it to go in. At Amazon and with customers, we often talk about learning from Amazon, our digital innovation practices, our working backwards practices, et cetera. But what we're telling you is the end story of a 20-year journey of culture change. And so we do have lots of mechanisms. We have 2 pizza teams many people have heard about. We have working backwards. We have correction of error processes. We have a standard reporting process and cycle. We have a standard metrics mechanisms that we use. We have lots of mechanisms that help us enable our business the way that Jeff had described. But in this case, what we're looking for is to build some of those mechanisms inside of our enterprise customers that allow you to point to where you need to change and then have a kit and a toolkit and an enablement strategy to actually go drive that change in the right parts of your business. The next piece of the puzzle that we look at is we have inputs coming from operational insights and customer insights. Those flow into helping us identify where we need to change. We have a toolkit that helps us go make change. The next piece is about aligning technology to the value of what we're doing. So in this space, really what we're talking about is understanding the value of whatever the work that we're doing so that we align our operational practices to the value of the piece of the portfolio that we're touching. So I usually start this segment with a little short history on how kind of we got to where we are. So if you look at the history of IT, IT actually started in lines of businesses. IT wasn't a centralized function when it first started. What happened was lots of lines of business started using IT, so IT started showing up in more places, and they said, hey, this is getting really big, let's centralize it and make it more efficient. They centralized it with procurement, human resources, payroll, legal, et cetera, et cetera. When it came together and started servicing lots of businesses, what happened was the IT budget got really expensive and it started to grow, et cetera, et cetera. And as that grew, the executive leadership team started looking down across their different functions in their businesses and said, hey, your budget's getting really expensive. I need you to tighten your belt a little bit. This happened to happen at the exact same time as Lean and Six Sigma and some other things. And so what IT did was they said, okay, we need to become more efficient as IT. And we misused Lean and Six Sigma in a couple of different ways that didn't focus on the full value chain of what we were producing, just focused on the value chain of what IT was producing. So we made IT more efficient by creating processes, often single processes, that treated every customer and every workload and every application basically the exact same. So if I was building a 3-tier application to help 10 people in human resources be more effective at something they were doing, the exact same process that I would use to build and provision a SAP farm that was going to run the core of the business, except the second one may require 4 more signatures at the top of the stack because it's a higher funding level. And so what we did is we made a single process in IT, and it actually displaced the burden of the independence and the value of the individual applications or the individual line of businesses back into the line of business. And that made line of businesses way more inefficient, but it was super hard to identify and measure that they were being inefficient because of what was happening within IT. And so what happened was a couple of different things that are most notable, which is one is SaaS technologies. So we saw the pop-up of a lot more SaaS, software as a service technologies, because in most enterprises, IT was a bit of a monopoly. Lines of businesses had to come to IT to get anything. SaaS technologies could be procured directly through the line of business, and now they had an out to get things they needed to be more effective. The other thing that happened was the agile startup, right? The whole idea of agile was really about coming roots up through IT to make IT more effective and more efficient to serve their business partners, focusing on the full value chain, not just the IT value chain. And so as we look at that story and we look at the way that works, this is what we're talking about with aligning technology by value, right? Today we think about bimodal. Gartner published bimodal years back. I'm not going to get into the debate about how accurate it is, but I think most people still talk about it, which is on one end, you're waterfall and you're traditional and everything moves at the snail's pace. And on the other end, you're DevSecOps with agile teams that are product centric, and you're creating features that release in the morning by the afternoon. And then a lot of people believe there's somewhere in the middle, right? So there's both ends of the bimodal spectrum, and there's a middle section that's really focused on automating a lot of IT operations that makes a trimodal model, which is probably closer to where we actually are if you think about it not as an end state, but actually how you progress as an organization. And so for me, the way I describe this to a lot of organizations that helps, I think, sink in with executives is start thinking about your IT portfolio differently. I use a car analogy associated to your IT portfolio to kind of paint this picture, but it tells you why and what you need to be thinking about doing differently in the future and start that journey to that state. And so if you think about your application portfolio or your product portfolio, think about it in 3 basic slices. There's exceptions to all rules, but if you think about it, about 60% of the enterprise landscape is a commodity-based application set. Small applications that make small populations of people more efficient, more effective at what they do. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of these in most enterprises. The second layer of your portfolio is your enterprise portfolio landscape. And so these are enterprise apps. These are CRM systems. These are ERP systems. These are mainframe transactional systems that run the core of your business. These are the things that touch everything across the enterprise and have an impact in almost every single line of business. And then the third part of your portfolio is your differentiation piece of your portfolio. The differentiation piece of your portfolio is insanely high value. This is where your customer interactions occur. This is what makes you better than your competition. These are the things you are innovating, creating features on. This is where your customer demand shows up the most. And so if we think about those 3 pieces of our portfolio, we need to align the way we deliver the technology solutions to those three pieces of the portfolio. I shouldn't take a commodity application and put all the investment into it for it to behave like a differentiation workload, for it to release 1 or 2 things a year. At the same point in time, I shouldn't take a differentiation workload and torture it with commodity processes that slow down its ability to release and really piss off all of your technologists within your organization. And so to kind of bring that story home, think about those 3 slices and think about a simple car analogy to kind of go with it. Imagine you have a work truck, you have a minivan, and you have a Porsche 911 Turbo, like the sweet one from Bad Boys back in the 80s, right? You got all 3 of these cars at your house. Those 3 cars produce very different types of value for your home. So you don't treat them the same, right? You don't get in your Porsche to go pick up 5 kids to take them to soccer practice. And you don't go get in your work truck to take a cruise down the strip or a cruise down the coastline with your wife or your husband. Like, that just doesn't make sense. And so if we take that analogy further and you think about how you treat those vehicles when you bring them home, when you come home in your work truck and you pull into your garage, you don't even pull in your garage. You go to the side of the garage and it sits in the rain because who cares? Your minivan goes in the big garage door that's closest to the door to the house so that when the kids fall out of the car, they break as few things as possible between the car and the house, right? And the Porsche is in the single garage door, way over in the corner. There's nothing around it on the walls. It's got a big cover over the top of it. It gets the care and feeding and the treatment. It probably gets washed more than the other cars, even though it's driven the least, right? So if we think about our application portfolio and the way we treat our applications, and we think about the way we treat cars, if we have 3 different types of cars, think about the way that we do that. That's how we're thinking about aligning work to the technology. Now, not every application can have its own way of working, and this is one of the hardest things for enterprises to get their grasp around. But here is about the what and the why. This isn't about how you start to break apart your policies and your practices and your processes. This is about committing to the fact that it is acknowledged and obvious that we have to do it. Once we commit that we have to do it, then we can find a way to do it. And so start simple. Start with those 3 simple tiers of your portfolio. Think about those 3 tiers and start asking questions about, why am I treating this workload this way? If it's a high value workload, or why am I investing so much in a low value workload? Because my processes, policies, and practices absolutely say I have to do so. The next piece that we'll talk about is actually the digital solution space. So as you think about the portfolio tier, digital solutions, differentiation, this is the top of the stack. I'm gonna talk about this one the least, because everybody loves talking about this one. And there's plenty of examples, and you can go to reinvent or summits, et cetera, and they'll have thousands of these. Really easy example is HBO Max, right? HBO Max is Warner Media's direct-to-consumer platform. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard of it. Has 70 million customers. It launched in May 2020, right in the middle of COVID. Right, they used serverless event-based architectures to actually manage the security protocols and processes around the entire platform so it could scale indefinitely when needed. But if you think about digital solutions, those are the types of solutions we're talking about. It's changing the way you interact with customers, drastically changing the way you're delivering service and product. And this is the top tier of your portfolio. It's where you're going to invest the most. It's where you have to drive the most change in the way you work. The next one we focus on is asset modernization. Asset modernization for most enterprises is the middle layer of your portfolio. It's your enterprise-wide workloads. Again, ERP, CRMs, mainframes, transactional systems. You go through that entire list, and you think about really critical systems of record, and you think about mass volumes of transactions with customers, and you think about an enterprise's key value, that the differentiation between an enterprise and the startup. Enterprises have insane amounts of data about their customers and about the world that they service in these historical systems over time. The problem is they can't unlock them, right? There's 2 problems with core systems inside of an enterprise. One is you cannot get the data out of them. You can't see where you have customers in multiple lines of businesses and multiple products because of the way the systems function and the way they don't integrate. The second challenge that you run into is that many of these systems are landlocked, right? They can't scale. You can't add 1 million more customers because the system will fall over. You can't do an extra 10 million transactions on Black Friday because the system will fall over. And so your product people literally are designing products to avoid the constraints that fall on your core platforms within your business. So this piece of the puzzle is all about core asset modernization, those wide-touching assets. A great example here is actually Nationwide again. So if you look at Nationwide and what Nationwide did when we started working with them really intensely at the beginning of 2019, is we started to build a migration strategy that was based on technology. The top-down view of what they needed to accomplish from a business kept pointing back to the fact that if we didn't modernize their core platforms, they couldn't build the solutions and products for customers that they actually needed. And so they actually reversed the order. They moved their claims management system, policy administration system, nationwide.com. A lot of people don't think of their website as a critical system, but take your website down and see what happens. It's a critical system, I promise. And so the last one that they actually looked was all of their data warehouse systems. They targeted those. And they moved 250 other business critical workloads to the cloud. And the reason was they wanted to modernize them. As they moved them over, they actually modernized them so they could build API interactions between the core systems using modern approaches. And they were able to bring their actual quote process down from minutes to less than 20 seconds. And because they moved all of those systems over, they were actually able to look at their data then and build an enterprise governed data lake. They took data from multiple systems, core assets, transaction systems, systems of record, Salesforce.com, you name it. And they put them into an enterprise governed data lake. And they actually built a process to curate and classify that data so that they could make data exploration by their product owners really easy. This allows them to make better decisions with high confidence at a faster pace to improve the life for their members and to improve their business position. So I think one of the best examples is Nationwide. When you think about a core asset modernization, think about that story and why you have to get the hub and the core of the business right, and you can't avoid it and put it off because you're afraid of it from a risk perspective. The next story that we talk about is commodity transition. So if you go through the puzzle here, again on the capabilities, at the top we're building demand, fine-tuned demand that tell us what we need to do. In the middle, we're talking about building the ability to change parts of our business, aligning technology to the type of outcomes we need based on the value of whatever we're getting ready to do, and then the digital solutions and the asset modernization in the business. The next one is commodity transition. This is about getting the things that matter the least to us out of our way. The best example in this scenario is actually the fact that most organizations start their business and their cloud adoption strategies with commodity workloads because they're low risk. So you build a center of excellence, you train a bunch of people, you build up your talent, you have really smart people, you move a bunch of workloads, and what happens? Your center of excellence becomes operations of low risk, low value workloads. And when that happens, you actually end up with a turnover problem because the people that are really smart don't want to babysit low risk, low value workloads doing operational duties. And so when you think about commodity transition, think about that story. Think about how do we get the things that matter the least to us, undifferentiated heavy lifting off our plates, and how do we be more ruthless about where we're not doing that and where we are doing that? I know there's a lot of confusion in this space because of outsourcing and then insourcing and then outsourcing and this transition back to insourcing, but it's about insourcing in the right places and getting the things that matter the least that we still need off of our plates until they can get SaaSified, which is taking way longer than anybody thought it would. And so a good example here is actually Thomson Reuters. So Thomson Reuters, a few years back, had an opportunity to exit data centers, but they also needed to build new products. The problem was they had over 10,000 assets spread across 400 applications, spread across 7 data centers, and actually to hit the big financial opportunity they had in front of them, they needed to do it in less than 2 years. And so looking at this, they wanted to solve 2 core problems. One, building capacity in a space that they didn't have capacity existing at a pace faster than they could actually build it. So how do you build cloud environments? How do you manage cloud environments? And how do you operationalize 10,000 assets in the cloud when you don't have a capacity right now to manage 100? The second thing they were wanting to do is get the non-critical workload stuff off their plates so that as they did this transition, they could focus on modernizing the right parts of their portfolio for the strategy they had ahead of them. So what they did was they partnered with AWS Managed Services. They actually worked with AWS Managed Services to move all of those assets out of those data centers in less than 2 years. AWS Managed Services provided them a couple of really key pieces of value. One, they gave them operational support on day one that was compliant to the regulatory needs that they had. 2, they gave them environments that actually stood up for and were blessed by whatever regulatory needs that they had to have that quickly. And 3, they gave them capacity. They gave them the capacity, worked with Thomson Reuters to understand the patterns within their portfolio and move those patterns more effectively and more efficiently over a period of time. But they could take that heavy lifting off of their plate. AMS could take a bulk of that, put it on their shoulders, and then Thomson Reuters' core team could actually focus on the areas they needed to grow the most. And the last capability we talk about is emerging technology adoption. I think this is one of the most interesting ones. It gets debated quite a bit, but I think it's just critical. If you think about the flow of this, of demand in the top capabilities, the core of your business there in the middle, getting the distractionary work out of your way on the left, emerging technology adoption is about empowering those teams you've now put in the core. It's about giving those teams the tools and the capabilities that they need to be most effective and most efficient in getting new solutions to customers and solving your business challenges. And so if you think about AWS today, we have hundreds and hundreds of services. Think about how hard it would be for an enterprise to develop all of those services and to predict what they may need. And so if you go through that stack and you think about some of the things that Andy Jassy said in the past, which is speed disproportionately matters at every stage of your business and in every size company. It is not preordained. Speed is a choice. And this is a choice you can make. Giving your teams access to emerging technology and creating the ability for them to not just see technologies they could use, but quickly move them through practices and processes to get them integrated, make sure they're being adopted successfully and securely and used appropriately is a critical piece of this puzzle. If you try and build these services on your own, it's going to be really, really hard and you're typically going to be behind the curve. So if you think about things like our AI services that AWS offers to customers, whether it's translate, poly, personalize, forecast, or if you think about some of the things we do with IoT like Greengrass or Device Defender or FleetWise, these services are out there. There's no reason to rebuild them. And building large portions of your team to rebuild those types of services when they could be solving business problems or customer value problems is just a misuse of resources, in my opinion. And so with that, that rounds out the 8 capabilities that we think most enterprises should really focus on. There's 2 really important factors. 1, you don't have to build them all at once. You can take a string and think about a business problem or challenge you need to solve and actually connect the dots through this thing to understand which ones light up that you could focus on as you're delivering business value. So you don't have to build all of these once. The key is you start with the end in mind. If we're running a large program to deliver a new solution, to deliver a new innovation capability, whatever it is, take that problem, look at this thing, and highlight the areas where you think you could actually start to build repeatable capability and mechanisms so you're building muscle memory. So you plan at the beginning to invest a little extra in that space. So at the end, you can look down and say, hey, we built this amazing insights capability. We applied it to this P&L to do operational insights. But the team, the way they work, the mechanisms they use, how they function, we can reuse that. So we can go horizontal to line of business number 2 that has a different operational problem, use the same tools, processes, approach, same architectures to aptly replicate those capabilities. So with that, let me hit on a couple of things that we offer from AWS. The first is the AWS Enterprise Transformation Program. The AWS Enterprise Transformation Program was launched in 2019 after a few years of study of what we're seeing in the industry. And that program is actually designed to help customers building all 8 capabilities that we just talked about. It's designed to function across multiple work streams. It's designed to work with our AWS professional services and our APN partner networks, all of our large GSIs, and we're actually working with a lot of our business consultant partners as well to help paint the picture of the business opportunities and then build the strategy to achieve the 8 capabilities that build that sustainable transformation. Nationwide Insurance was our first customer of that program. The second one is the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework. Hopefully everybody has heard of that. It's just gone through so many revisions lately. CAF 3.0 was released. Dr. Sasa, good friend of mine, has done an amazing job with CAF. CAF is always a great resource. If you're looking for content around specific capabilities you're building in your organization, whether it's operations, platform management, single panes of glass, developing CI/CD capabilities, lots of good stuff in the Cloud Adoption Framework. The next one is Digital Innovation Program. The reason I call this out is because this is a space enterprises really struggle. It actually hits 3 key capabilities within our capability chart. Customer insights is the first one. The second one is the culture change and the ability to change. And then the third one is actually digital solutions. If you think about the Digital Innovation Program at AWS, we have a lot of offerings inside of that program that can help you light up those 3 capabilities, and often most enterprises need those. Those capabilities are really critical because those are the ones that get the attention of line of business leaders. And the line of business leaders, when they get bought in, that's when funding starts to show up to drive your transformation successfully. The last one we talk about is our professional services teams and our AWS partner network. As we've built this model and we've built the 8 capabilities, we've been working with professional services and with our partners to actually build reusable deployment models, reusable service offerings from those organizations that help build and establish those capabilities we discussed today. Couple notes just to wrap out. We call this peculiar Amazon approaches. For me, this is important just because there's a couple of lessons learned that I want everybody to think about as you go through the strategy of building capabilities through transformation. One is start with customers, start with the business problem, make sure you define it well. Don't get to the point where you're given a program update and you have executives in the room and your executives look at each other and realize they all expect something different from one program that cannot possibly deliver to all of them. So work backwards from your customer or your operational insight, start there and then go forward. Two pizza team approach, that's all about, Jeff Smith, his idea around distributing work efficiently and effectively to empowered teams. That's what two pizza teams are for us. We build small teams of people that have all the capabilities they need inside of that team, and we empower them to make the right decisions for the products they're building and the customers on the other end. Experience-based activities. Do not design a long transformation strategy. If you look at the enterprise transformation program, we've actually designed it so our first engagement is a month long. The second engagement is 3 months long. And then after that, it's a quarterly engagement at a time. And the reason is we need to start getting on the keyboards to understand which assumptions are true and which assumptions are false as fast as possible. Because the sooner we learn that, the sooner we're in reality, the sooner we're in reality, the sooner we can make progress. And then the last one, of course, is embrace failure and learn from it. You're not gonna get everything right. Don't be afraid to get things wrong. Think about how you actually position that in your business case is the one thing I tell people. We don't position that in most of our business cases today. We produce business cases that say this is gonna be amazing. Then when it's not, everybody thinks, well, we can never do it. The reality is, in our business cases, we like to tell people ahead of time, probably gonna hit a few snags in the first few releases. Be prepared for that, but we will be crisp and clear about how we articulate the value we actually did create. And so with that, we will wrap up. I appreciate everybody's attention. I hope this is helpful. I hope understanding the capabilities is super useful for you and you can make use of it going forward. All right, one last note. While you are here, remember I talked about building capacity in the places that matter for talent. We offer so much to you. Take advantage of it, right? Our skills builder programs have 500 free offerings. You have role-based programs. You have job-based programs. There are learning paths. There's so much there that you can use. Please take advantage of it. And then certifications are always valuable. We have 11 of them now. You can scan one or both of these, but please do make use of these programs. Building talent is the long pole in the tent. I promise you, the sooner you get to this piece of the puzzle, the better off you will be in the long run. Thank you so much. Please complete your survey and enjoy the rest of the conference.